Hey y'all, welcome back to your first year of drum lessons. This is lesson 2. If you missed the first lesson, it'll be before this in this playlist, or you can find it on my page. If you've gotten through week 1, welcome back. I'm really excited to pick up where we left off. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Penny Larson, and I've been drumming and teaching for a really long time, and this series is honestly mostly a way for me to reinforce lessons that I'm teaching my own students, but also I figured I would share it with y'all because I think I have a perspective that can be helpful, whether you're just starting out or taking lessons or have a teacher or what have you. So let's pick up where we left off. We're going to start again with some technique. We're going to learn some written music today. Scary, scary. And we're going to expand a little bit on the rudiments that we learned last week, but mainly review the rudiments. Okay? So, technique. Last week we started with mostly a wrist motion, right? And we said the important thing was that bounce, right? And we were trying to use just our wrist. So I'm going to tell you a little story of how I learned to play. My mother put me in a drum bugle corps, so drumline, right, when I was 8. And unfortunately, the drum corps that I was in folded, had to go out of business. Okay, so I ended up with a teacher for a little while, and then I ended up on my own for a little while. And so my technique instruction was really shallow at first, and no one told me that I was allowed to use my fingers. So for the first year or two, let's take the double stroke roll, I was using just my wrists. And I was squeezing pretty tight. And eventually, basically in one day, I was still holding on with my fingers, but I learned how to relax my wrists. Okay? And the wrist, I still think, is at least as big a part of the motion that makes sense to me as fingers. Fingers, you say? We can use our fingers? Yep, we get to use our fingers. So, remember last week we were doing just wrist? So now, what I want to do is open my fingers and pull the stick into my hand. Like so. And we're going to do that all at once. And this is a little bit of a tricky move. So if it doesn't fully make sense at first, that's okay, as long as you're moving in this direction. I'm going to start, so last week we had our hand flat, and I told you we were going to throw that away, so we're going to kind of throw it away. We're going to turn our hand just a little bit, okay? So you don't want your thumb on top, because then you can end up doing this, and if you know anything about the 2 bones in your forearm, they don't like to move like this, and your wrist really doesn't like to compress like that. There's a thing called carpal tunnel syndrome, and we're going to try to avoid that at all costs. Okay, so not all the way over, kind of split the difference. Okay, so if your thumb was on top, your thumb was on the side, now it's in the middle. Okay, when we lift our wrist, we're also going to open our fingers and see how far back I can get the stick with a very neutral position. Basically, my hand is still, I haven't lifted my wrist too far, right? I've opened my hand, and I'm going to pull with my fingers and my wrist at the same time. this is a short downstroke, right? I'm leaving the stick in the down position. Last week we did everything from the up position. My at rest position is down. Okay, so I'm going to start here. I'm going to lift the stick up, open my hand, lift my wrist, and pull down. So that when I'm playing notes in a row like we were last week, I'm going to start here. But it has a similar effect, right? Once that stick is elevated the first time, it's the same deal, right? I'm pulling, I'm letting the stick bounce, right? I'm just keeping it down as an at-rest position after each note. This has made the most sense to me over the years. It probably has something to do with marching and drum corps, and this was always our, this, right? But when we opened our sticks, they'd be down, right? And it just makes sense to me on the drum set too, to maintain a compact presence. So I keep my sticks down. So that's pretty much it for expanding on our technique. Like I said, this is a bit of a tricky move, so be patient with yourself. Really try and think about pulling with your fingers and moving your wrist. Okay, keep your elbows still. If your forearm moves a little sympathetically, right? See how my forearm is definitely moving a little, but I'm not doing this, right? I'm not using my forearm as part of the motion. Okay? It's just floating. Okay, makes sense? So now we're going to do a really simple exercise with that technique, just to show you. So left hand, same deal, right? We've got thumb kind of halfway in the middle. Pull with the fingers and lift the wrist, okay? So this really simple exercise is just called eights, and it's just 8 notes on each hand. There are 2 ways that I like to work on technique. One is an extended series of notes with each hand. We kind of did that last week, right? An exercise that I did a lot with my drum instructor when I was younger would be 100 groups of 4. Right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 100. The other one that I did a lot was 8 on each hand. Okay, and so let's do that, and let's put on a metronome so we can see a few different tempos. So I'm going to start at 100. Okay, so we're going to do this exercise called eights, and it's 8 on a hand, but there's another reason it's called eights. And so let's take a second to talk about notes. And for our purposes, mainly we mean the rhythmic value of notes, right? We'll talk about the staff when we get to the drum set. For now, we're just worried about how long does a note last? And luckily, all of our notes last this long. Okay? So what the rhythmic value of a note tells us is when to play the next note. There's this little tree, and I'll have a link to a printout of this. Last week we were dealing with groups of 4. That's this line here, the quarter note. Those happen in groups of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The basic rhythmic derivations are either having that or doubling it. And I'm going to jump way up to here. This is a whole note. A whole note takes up the whole measure. But again, for us, because our notes are all that long, a whole note sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are some things we can do to make the drum sustain, but we're not worried about that yet. For the most part, the drums are a self-sustaining instrument, which means you hit it and it lasts as long as it lasts. Okay, so we're going to cut that in half, and we get 2 half notes. Cut a hole in half, you get halves. So those are worth 2 beats each. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sense? Cut those in half. Cut a half and a half. You end up with a fourth. Another word for a fourth is a quarter, right? 4 quarters and $1 for us Americans. And I bet other denominations of money have groups of 4 too. So you got 4 quarters and $1, 4 quarter notes in a measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the pivot point. Okay? And what I mean by that is quarter notes, it's 1 note per beat, and 1 beat gets 1 note, right? It sounds silly to say it that way because it's like, well, it's the same. Well, yeah, that's what makes quarter notes special, right? Quarter notes last 1 beat, and 1 beat is filled by 1 quarter note, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to continue, cut those in half. So you cut a fourth in half, you get an eighth. I'm sorry for all the fractions, but that's how this works. So eighth notes are 2 notes per beat, okay? Each eighth note is a half a beat long. So we need a new thing to say, right? Because we're going to play like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to say and for those notes in the middle. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay? One more step. I know this is a lot all at once. 16th notes. We cut an eighth in half, we get a 16th. If you notice, each of these lines is a whole measure's worth of notes. 16th notes, there are 16 notes in the whole measure. 4 notes per beat. Each note is 1/4 of 1 beat. Okay? So now we've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. We need syllables for those notes that are in between. We're going to say E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1. And this is the last tricky counting thing we'll have for a little while, so you have time to adjust this, but I promise that if you just sit and play and practice 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1. In really short time, that'll feel natural. At first it feels like, Martian, right? It feels really unnatural at first. Don't worry about that. Just do it very slowly. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1, right? Until it starts to feel a little natural. You can do it a little faster, a little more natural. You can do it a little faster still. I'm going to show off a feature of this is the paid version, remember, of Pro Metronome. And I can make it count for me. And I can even make it count all of those E's and Uhs.
1 E and dot 2 E and dot 3 E and dot 4 E and dot 1 E and dot 2 E and dot 3 E and dot 4 E and dot 1 E and dot 2 E and dot 3 E and dot 4 E and dot 1 E and dot 2 E and dot 3 E and dot 4 E and dot 1 E and dot 2 E and
So it can be a little boost to help you at first. You can also just put it on more of a click sound. 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. Okay, so that's our basic rhythmic note tree. And the more you can practice that and internalize those different rhythms, those different rhythmic values, the better off you'll be as we move forward. Okay, we're going to do some specific exercises with that in the next few weeks. But if you can put on your metronome and play each one, let's do that to see how that sounds. Nope. Subdivisions, quarter notes. All right, so I'm going to have the metronome just click quarter notes. 60 beats per minute, that's this number up here. So this is 1 beat per second, right? A nice mellow tempo. 2, 3, 4. Let's start with, we'll do 2 bars, 2 measures of each rhythm, and we'll start with whole notes so you can see how they all sound. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 2 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. Okay, so really quickly we go from very, very, very slow to really dense, right? And that's just at 60 beats per minute. When you start to speed up faster than that, the 16 notes can get really quick, right? Okay, so that's our note values. Let's jump back a couple minutes. This exercise called eighths. Well, why is it called eighths? Because it's eighth notes, okay? So we're gonna play 8 notes per beat, per measure, sorry, and 8 notes per hand, okay? I'm still gonna leave the metronome on quarter notes, so we're gonna have to subdivide in our head a little bit. 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay, so here we go. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Let's speed that up a little bit. That was 60. Let's jump up to 90. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1. Speed up a little bit more. Let's jump way up to 120 and see how that goes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 4 and 1, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, and we can keep speeding up. If you noticed, this might be a little subtle to notice, as the tempo speeds up, I have to hold the stick even a little bit looser and rely on the bounce a little bit more, right? When the tempo is slow, the notes are kind of separated, right? There's a stop as it speeds up, right, I'm like bouncing a ball almost, right? And because I'm just bouncing the stick, I could do this at this tempo, or even here. This is pretty relaxed. I could do this for a long time without getting tired, right? Because it's just bouncing that stick. So remember, we're trying to stay relaxed. We're trying to stay consistent. Pull with your fingers, lift and drop your wrist, and this should all come together for you. Eights, or if you'd rather do the 100 groups of 4 on each hand, or any way that you want to work on your technique repetitively with your hands. This is huge, right? Very soon we're going to get to stuff on the drum set where we're going to need eighth notes at 110, 120 beats per minute. So work with your metronome, work on increasing your speed, always paying attention to form, technique, and evenness and control, right? Remember, speed is the result of good technique. So if you're speeding up but your form looks silly, your sticks are all over the place, that's no good, right? You need to make sure that you are playing consistently, straight line with the stick, pulling with the fingers, dropping the wrist, right? Nice and relaxed, lots of bounce from the stick as you speed up. Okay, make sense? Awesome. So I said we were going to review the rudiments. We're actually going to take this handout, which will be a PDF, will be linked below. We're going to take number 3, which is 8th notes and 16th notes, which is going to sound scary. It's 8 notes and then 16 notes, right? It's a lot of notes. But we're going to do it really slowly. We're going to go way back down to 60. Okay. And so it's 60 beats per minute. 16th notes sound like this. 4, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. If that's too fast, you can totally slow it down to 50 or 40 even. Below 40, it starts to get almost difficult to keep track of the metronome. So there is a bottom threshold where it actually gets more difficult. Okay? If you're having difficulty with the metronome, just do this without the metronome at first, and then work on working the metronome in. Okay? So we're going to do 8th notes and 16th notes back and forth, one measure of each, right? And so remember, we're counting 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 16th notes are 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Okay, so both of those together are like this. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. Okay, so now that we've played that, let me explain a little bit about what's going on. We're playing 8th notes with our right hand and then 16th notes with alternating strokes. So all I'm doing is keeping my right hand the same in both measures. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E we're sort of doing half of 16th notes and then 16th notes together. We're doing the right side and then both hands. So all you have to do, once you get that right hand going, is just put your left hand in the middle. Right? Number 4 is the same thing with the left hand lead. Okay, let's try that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. So same thing, just the other side, right? My left hand is playing 8th notes. 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and then I just keep that going and put my right hand in the middle. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Piece of cake, right? Okay, so that's number 3 and 4 on the handout that'll be linked down below in the doobly-doo. Okay, so I want to briefly review the double stroke roll and paradiddles. It's a little weird because I can't see your progress, right? So let's at least play through them, and maybe I'll play them a little bit and you can try and play them along with me. So let's do the double stroke roll first, and let's play it instead of as quarter notes like we did last week, every note got a click. Let's do it as 8th notes, and let's see how that sounds. So every start of the double is going to get a beat. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, makes sense? So let's try it a little faster. That was 60. Let's try 80. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Let's push it one more time. Let's get up to 100. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 4, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 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 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay. So last, the paradiddle. The paradiddle, we're going to play as 16th notes, which is super scary, right? We're going to play a whole paradiddle on one beat. So 1 E and a 2 E and a paradiddle, paradiddle. Okay, like that. Let's start real slow. Let's go way down to 50. Okay, so 16th notes at 50 beats a minute are 2, 3, 4, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a paradiddle, 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 paradiddle. Okay, so if that's too much, slow it down even farther. Again, once you get below 40 beats per minute, keeping track of the metronome gets really tricky. So if 40 beats per minute is too fast, feel free to work on them more without the metronome before you bring them to the metronome as 16 notes. Okay, let's try them a little faster and see how that goes. So that was 50. Let's be bold. Let's try 70. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a paradiddle, 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 okay, let's get wild and crazy. How about 90? 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a paradiddle, 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 paradiddle. Let's do one more. 110. And again, right before we even do this, remember, don't push faster than you can play steady and evenly, right? I'm doing these at a bunch of different tempos to show you how they sound, okay? Do not go faster than you can go, right? Of course, I mean, it's a lie for me to say that totally, right? Of course, you're gonna try and get faster. We're all trying to get faster, okay? But the way to get faster is to make sure that you're relaxed, you're using good technique, you're using good form, you're doing the same motion over and over again, and you're playing evenly and cleanly. And by cleanly, I just mean that your notes are even, da, 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 right? If I wasn't looking, if I was just listening, it should sound like a steady stream of da, 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 da. Okay? So I'm going to play 110 for you. If you can play them at 110, super awesome. You are doing amazing. If you can't, that doesn't mean you're not doing awesome, right? It just means make sure you're working on your form and your technique, and you will get to 110, right? The coolest thing about a metronome is it is objective feedback, right? You know what speed you can do stuff at because the metronome will tell you. And the metronome will help you because, you know, even if you speed up 1 or 2 beats per measure a month, right? Well, whatever, you're still speeding up, okay? And most songs aren't as fast as you can play, right? Music isn't a race. So never get too caught up in how fast you can play. Like I say, it's a lie for me to say, don't worry at all about how fast you go, right? Of course, we all want to play faster. Sure, of course we do. But don't stress about it, right? It's not the goal, okay? The goal is to play well and fast sort of happens alongside of that and as a companion to that, but it's not its own goal. Okay? All right, so here they are at 110. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a paradiddle, 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 paradiddle Okay, so remember they should sound for now like just even 16th notes. Okay, and that's it. So what did we do today? We did a lot, right? We refined our technique, right? We're going to use our fingers now and pull the stick and use our wrist more at that angle. So now our hand is opening in a nice relaxed way, right? So you don't need to really extend your wrist very much at all. If you watch when I'm playing, my wrist comes up, but it's so just this motion, right? My hand is very pointed, okay? We learned notes. Oh my God, how scary, right? Counting whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes with the metronome, totally, right? Practice counting different notes against each other back to back, right? Quarter notes to eighth notes to 16th notes, that kind of thing. We facilitated that both with our 8 on a hand exercise, yeah, and numbers 3 and 4 on the basic rudiment pattern sheet that'll be down below in the doobly-doo. Go at a tempo that makes sense for you. Work on increasing your speed, but with form as your primary goal. Good technique, good form, good consistency, all that stuff. Stay relaxed. If you notice yourself tightening up, you're going too fast. Slow down. Squeezing to play faster will not only not help you, it will hurt you in the long run, I promise. And finally, we reviewed the single stroke roll, 3 and 4, and then the double stroke roll and single paradiddles. So pretty much just keep plugging away at the double stroke roll and single paradiddles, and we'll talk more about those next week. I'm also down below going to include a link to the Percussive Arts Society list of 40 official standard rudiments, okay? So we've done the single stroke roll, the double stroke roll, and the single paradiddle. We've done 3 out of the 40. It'll take us a while to get to all 40. Okay, so that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions or comments, definitely leave them down below. Please remember to like the video and please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notified when the next lesson comes, okay? Spoiler, it's going to be next Wednesday at noon, but just to have it, you know, a little reminder is always helpful. Okay, so keep practicing, and I'll see you next week. Well, I'll see you Friday for lesson 2 of the drum set, but I'll see you here at the pad again next week. All right, take care, y'all.